Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So this Abhinava Bharati, of course, it is a 10th century commentary. Let us know more about that later. Since the Baroda edition prepared by M. Ramakrishna Kavi, it almost took 38 years to be printed and published. There were many other editions appearing, making use of the available portions. Because this took a lot more span of time, because they wanted to give a full version, and in between there were many versions coming up, as we saw earlier, with 2 chapters, 3 chapters, just the music chapters, thus just the Rasa Bhava chapters, etc. And they were published also. Even before the 4th part of this appeared in 1964, K.S. Ramaswamy Shastri brought out a revised second edition of the first volume in 1956. The first volume was in 1926. The same first volume, second edition was brought out in 1956. By the time the copies of the first edition were exhausted, and the demand for reprinting from many universities, because the universities started propagating Natyasastra, that is when, after 1926 till 1956, because the second edition was brought out, but that itself is nearly 30 years. But even then, it was propagated in the universities, colleges, and Rasa Adhyaya, Bhava Adhyaya, and the literary criticism, everything became the subject of study under the university, and thus the second edition was also brought out. And in this second edition, the sculptures of the Karanas, nearly 93 Karanas of the Chidambaram temple, were reproduced in the second edition of the first volume. This Karanas of Chidambaram, of course, there are all the 108 Karanas are there in Chidambaram, and of course there are 4 Gopuras, and the eastern Gopura has a set of all these 108 Karanas along with the shloka from Natyasastra, verse from Natyasastra. So these were brought out as blocks by the Archaeological Survey of India, and they were added in the second edition of the first volume, because Karanas are dealt with in the Tandava Lakshanam chapter, which is the 4th chapter of Natyasastra. The third edition was later brought out, which was almost the same of the second edition, and the 4th and the latest edition of the same Gaikwad Oriental series was prepared by Dr. K. Krishnamurthy, foremost among the literary critics, and he has brought out the edition, that is the fourth edition of the first volume of Natyasastra, because the first volume of Natyasastra consists of the two major elements, especially chapter, we can even say 3, chapter 2 connecting with the stage, the Ranga, chapter 4 connecting with the dance elements, Tandava, and chapter 6 and 7 connected with Rasa and Bhava, aesthetic experience, which is the crux of the whole of Natyasastra. And of course, in the 6th chapter, the Sangraha of Natyasastra is seen. So this was brought out and compared with the merits of the previous editions, Dr. K. Krishnamurthy brought out the 4th edition. So according to N.P. Unni, who has translated the book of Natyasastra, we will be moving on and seeing how many versions of Natyasastra are there till now. His is one of the very famous translation with almost one volume which talks about the introduction to Natyasastra, especially refers to the introduction in the whole volume of Natyasastra. Now moving on into some of the critiques on this edition of Kavi. In the review of Kavi's edition of Natyasastra, in the Indian Historical Quarterly, Dr. S.K. Day had pointed out some objections on the methodology adopted by Ramakrishna Kavi in postulating recensions. Mr. Kavi reacted to the criticism, sharply criticizing the edition of Vakrokti Jivita by Day. He says, and this according to the latter is to be regarding the editorial drawbacks. P.V. Kane notes a portion of Abhinava's commentary on the last verses of the 5th chapter of Natyasastra was not available. He says, and there are of course some of the portions of Abhinava Bharati which are not available and also not in detail, especially some of the Chari Angika Abhinaya chapters, the Chari chapters. The Abhinava Bharati is not having a detailed commentary. Of course, there are many commentators who have given their ideas about these forms, and from some of the earlier commentaries have also given some insight and light into these aspects of dance. Coming on to the other scholars like Dr. V. Raghavan and some other writers have also taken exception to the methodology followed by Ramakrishna Kavi. It is against this background that Dr. K. Krishnamurthy has indicated Kavi to certain extent. We also have Pandit Madhusudan Shastri, a traditional scholar of Varanasi, who has edited the text with the Abhinava Bharati commentary. He has added his own gloss on both text and the commentary. So his commentary is called as Madhusudani, and also he has given the commentary in Hindi called as Balakrida. and this is published by the Hindu University, Varanasi in 1971 and 1975 with the Balakrida. So, as many scholars have read the text of Natyasastra and also added their own interpretation in their commentaries, this has misled the later readers, not knowing if this was given by Bharata or given by Abhinavagupta or by the editor of the manuscript or publishing translator, the translator who has published the work. So, this slightly misleads the reader, even in many of the texts. But coming back to the versions, they add more inputs into our knowledge to understand and research on the text directly. So, that is why generally scholars say, go directly to the text and read. Do not read, work on the translations, work with the translations. Though in some countries the translations become more popular. But the text has to be directly approached. That is what these scholars say. So, that is how in this commentary of Madhusudana Shastri, he has brought in the text, commentary and a Hindi commentary. This is a wonderful project, and he has in his Madhusudani, it is a Sanskrit commentary, as I told you. The first volume, which talks about the 108 Karanas, the drawings of these 108 Karanas are given without mentioning the source. The commentary is very useful for the students of Natyasastra. He has adopted the Gaikwad Oriental Series edition as his source for Abhinava Bharati and for the drawings. Next is the credit for the first critical edition by Dr. Mohan Ghosh from Kolkata. He has meticulously done the editing work, and the original text was brought in 2 volumes. That is, first volume gave the whole of Sanskrit verse, and the second volume gave the whole of English translation. So, this was almost the first text which gave the English translation. So, as we had the Gaikwad Oriental series earlier and the Madhusudan Shastri's text with commentary of Abhinava Bharati and Hindi translation, we then had the text in Sanskrit by Mohan Ghosh, translated by Mohan Ghosh in English as 2 volumes. He has done the editing based on many manuscripts. The original text was in 2 volumes, not in 1 volume. The original text had 2 volumes and the translation had 2 volumes. So, that is how he first brought out the text. So, the whole text of 36 chapters were in 2 volumes and the translation was brought out by him in other 2 volumes. Thus, the first complete translation was prepared by Ghosh, and it was a very famous translation and welcomed by the scholars of dance, drama, music and all the field of arts. This was published by Manisha Granthalaya, Calcutta, and the second by Asiatic Society, Calcutta. Both the volumes of the English translation were issued by the same society. So, the first volume, first to 27 chapters. Then the second volume, translation, 28 to 36 chapters. Both were by Asiatic Society in 1950 and 1961. This was even earlier to the text by Madhusudan Shastri. That is, the text, the translation was even earlier to the commentary, Abhinava Bharati's commentary as given by Madhusudan Shastri. But this Manmohan Ghosh text did not have the commentary of Abhinava Bharati. According to Manmohan Ghosh, he says, the attempts of scholars to publish various chapters of Natyasastra and the remaining pages deal with many matters such as the meaning of Natya, vrittis, literary structure, kinds of plays, plot and its development, playhouse, costumes and the makeup. Early and later writers on drama, the two recensions and commentators of the Natyasastra. So that is how he has brought in this version of Natyasastra as a commentary, as an original text and a translation. Text was published by the Manisha Granthalaya and the translation was published by the Asiatic Society, Kolkata, and edited and translated by Manmohan Ghosh, which was one of the first of the translations in English and which became a very popular, and still now it has been reprinted and available for the readers of Natyasastra. But now the print available has just two volumes with the text, the transliteration of the shloka. Because what is transliteration? The text which is in Sanskrit or the Devanagari script has to be transliterated in English for the readers who are not familiar with the Devanagari script. So thus, the text with the transliteration and the translation is available in two volumes reprinted for the present day readers of Natyasastra. One of the next important publication, editorial by Dr. R.S. Nagar of the Sanskrit department of the University of Delhi. He has given us the book Natyasastra along with the Abhinava Bharati commentary. It is in 4 volumes. That is Natyasastra of Bharata Muni with the commentary of Abhinava Bharati of Abhinava Gupta by Parimal Publications, Delhi, 1983, first edition. And now almost the 4th edition is in the market. And the present writer, that is R.S. Nagar, has given us not only the Natyasastra but the commentary Abhinava Bharati in a full version. But this does not have the English translation for the text. So it is in volume 1, first to 7th chapter, volume 2, 8th to 18th chapter, volume 3, 19th to 27th chapter, and volume 4, 28 to 37 chapters. And this present edition is prepared in consultation with the text edited by these learned scholars based on the Gaikwad Oriental Series Edition, Kasi Sanskrit Series Edition, Kavyamala Edition and Manamohan Ghosh Edition, he says. And also after a scrutiny of nearly 40 manuscripts, which are very useful on account of the Abhinava Bharati's commentary, which is also carefully edited by the learned scholar Kavi, that is Manavalli Ramakrishna Kavi. He has brought out this. Parimal Publications has brought out this edition edited by Dr. R.S. Nagar. There is also another text by Acharya Vishweshwara, who has edited the text with Abhinava Bharati, with translation in Hindi with an exhaustive introduction. He has edited the first, second and the sixth chapter of the text. And another publication of the Natyasastra with Hindi translation, published by Babulal Shukla. And this is also up to the chapter 19 of the text. Another version by G.K. Bhatt. One more by the Rasadhyaya, volume 1 of Rasadhyaya by J.L. Mason and M.V. Patwardhan. Of course, one of the famous editions by Adya Rangacharya. The translation. He has done the Kannada translation and also the English translation. This is one of the famous editions or translations. Of course, this is not a detailed translation. This does not have the verse by verse translation. And a new critical edition by K.D. Tripathi based on the Nepali manuscript. The volume 1 is printed, published. Then we have some more versions of the whole Natyasastra translated by the Board of Scholars, published by Sadguru Publication from Delhi. This is also one of the famous translation. And we have lots of papers, research paper contributed by P.V. Kane, S.K. Day, V. Raghavan. They have contributed on Natyasastra. And we have a Tamil translation by N.S. Desigan. And we also have Telugu translations, Gujarati translation by Professor Tapasvi Nandi of Ahmedabad, many Malayalam translations, and most important translation in Malayalam by K.P. Narayana Pisharotti. And of course, one of the famous English translation by Professor N.P. Unni, which gives the text and the translation, text in Devanagari, and recent publication gives the text, transliteration and the translation. Same book by N.P. Unni. And other than that, we have a recent publication by Pushpendra Kumar, which gives the text in Sanskrit Abhinava Bharati, not the full Abhinava Bharati, but glimpses of Abhinava Bharati in Sanskrit, and of course the English translation for the text. And still scholars are working on the translation for Abhinava Bharati. So this is how the text has been taken forward and brought, published and given to us for the scholars and readers to work on further. And with this, we come to the end of the introduction. Now, we will move on to the chapters of Natyasastra, which gives voluminous ideas or the subject which goes on to 36 chapters. Thank you. Namaste.